Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
This morning, I'd like to talk on two paragraphs from page 103 of this book, Opening the Hand of Thought. Paragraph 1, 2, 3, paragraph 4 of page 103. The second paragraph is pretty long, but I'd like to read those paragraphs. In other words, egocentricity lies at the basis of whatever we see or do. It tugs along with us, being dragged around by egocentric thought. Our life cannot manifest directly and wind up pushed out of shape and disabled. This being dragged about by egocentric thought has been committed by humankind since its beginning. Adam and Eva truly put us in a mess. So now he talks about Adam and Eve. I saw a fascinating cartoon in a newspaper some years ago. Adam was trying with all his might to vomit up something he had eaten. Eva was standing beside him with a worried expression, saying, "Adam, hasn't that apple you ate come out yet?" If only humanity could once and for all vomit up the indigestible green apple of ego attachment. In a way, egocentric thought is a little like original sin. In Buddhism, true Zazen is, in a sense, the posture of vomiting up that apple. But when did we eat the apple? It was by no means in some remote mystical past. Here we are, merely interdependent existences, a collection of such accidental factors as heredity, the overall current of the times, and the social context in which we find ourselves. Without any good reason, moved by ignorance, we pompously stick a label onto this aggregation, calling it I. We firmly believe that this is our self, and we cling to ego as thought it simply existed in the natural order of things. Actually, one side of the power of outside of the power of ignorance, which causes attachment to the ego self. In each moment, where is that apple we ate? That apple is precisely what we are eating again and again in our attachment to ourselves. So he's talking about a cartoon about the Adam and Eve that came from Bible. I think all of you know. Now Okumura Roshi is discussing about how our life becomes deluded and how we act do things based on our delusive, ego-centered motivation. And I explained, according to Yogacara teaching, that is a part of Mahayana Buddhism, how our life and our way of viewing things become distorted and self-centered. And basically that is, things as a object, and we think ourselves or mind or subject. When these two encounters, somehow within our mind, when we encounter with some things, we have a sensation, and based on sensation we create perception, some kind of image. And when we see this perception as the object, we don't really see the object themselves. And this perception, when we see this perception as object, we do formation, and we make kind of a decision whether what is this, and whether this is good or bad to me, or beneficial or not beneficial, or I like this or not. That is what formation does. And we think this thing is called consciousness. Those are called 5 aggregate. And yet this consciousness has, according to Yogacara, has 8 layers. First 5 is consciousness caused by 5 sense organs, and 6 is mind, our usual thinking mind. And they thought there are 2 more layers, so this is like a subconsciousness. And 7th is called manas, and the 8th is called alaya, or 7th is in English called ego consciousness. And alaya means our storehouse. So all the experience we had in the past are stored in this storehouse as seeds. And this ego consciousness grasp the seeds stored in alaya as me, and grasp this is me. So all the experience and all the knowledges and the way of thinking, that kind of things are all stored in alaya, and 7th consciousness grasp this is me. And 7th consciousness influence and control first 6 consciousness. So when we see the object or perception of the object, we cannot be objective, because we are already something. This something or seed is called karma, because of our past experiences. That is called karma. What we see seems different depending upon what kind of karma we have. Something looks very variable or not variable, or another person who has a different karma think this is terrible. So even when we see the same things, each person has different views and opinions, and we start to argue. That is how our life is working, using this thing, consciousness, or our mind. So even though we think we see the same thing, actually the thing we see is different. That means we don't really see this thing, the object itself, but what we see is this perception. And the Yogacara teaching is also called mind only or consciousness only. That means all we experience is our consciousness. That means our consciousness or our mind divided into two parts. One, perception is become like object, and consciousness like a subject. But these two are one thing. Both are only consciousness. That is the basis, very basic teaching or structure of Yogacara teaching. So in this teaching, this seventh consciousness or ego consciousness is the basis of what is happening in our mind. That is how we see things and we take actions based on what we see. And that is what is called egocentredness. That is the starting point of this paragraph, which I already said. In other words, egocentricity lies at the basis of whatever we see or do, as deeper than the way we think. Our thinking mind. Our thinking mind is controlled by our egocentricity. So our thinking mind doesn't think I am egocentered, but I think, in my thinking mind, I'm absolutely correct. This is the way, this thing should be. And that is called view of existence or uken. And if this is how we usually think, what we think is what is there in front of us. And another extreme is called muken. Or it can be called kuken. Ku means emptiness. Mu means nothingness. Means all these thinking are not really there. So nothing is really there. And Buddha said, uken and muken, or view of existence and view of non-existence, are two extremes. But actual reality is ku. That means emptiness. But if we take this emptiness as a view or idea or concept, then we go another extreme. So ku is not our view. Emptiness cannot be our view. That is one of the definition of emptiness. That means emptiness is neither u nor mu. That means when it becomes our view, then it's not reality itself. And he said the teaching of emptiness is a kind of a medicine to be free from this view of existence. But if we make this emptiness as a concept and grasp to or cling to emptiness, then Nagarjuna said there's no medicine to heal that kind of sickness. Anyway, so this way of viewing things, either wu or mu, depending upon our karma or our personality, we go either extreme when we think. And that is a very basic structure of our life as a human beings who have to live with this brain. Anyway, and he continued, it tugs around with us. So this is the way we live. Being dragged around by egocentric thought, our life cannot manifest directly and wind up pushed out of shape. That means not wholesome, not healthy, and disabled and injured, because we don't really see the reality itself, but we interpret based on our twisted, distorted mind. Therefore, we make mistakes. And other people do the same thing. And, each of us start to, argue or sometimes fight. That is our human karma in Buddhist term. And he continues, this being dragged about by egocentric thought has been committed by humankind since its beginning. So this is not a personal problem after we are born, but this is how human beings are from the beginning. And in a sense, Okumura said this is the original sin, that our life become unhealthy. And he introduced this cartoon. Adam and Eve truly put us in a mess. So he said that their fault. but in the next paragraph he said, who are they? They are us. I saw a fascinating cartoon in a newspaper some years ago. Adam was trying with all his might to vomit up something he had eaten. So he had something wrong, so he tried to vomit. Eva was standing beside him with a worried expression saying, Adam, hasn't that apple you ate come out yet? So Adam is trying to vomit what he ate. That is this egocentredness. I think in English this boy is called Adam's apple. If this is the apple, then there's no way to vomit, because this is part of us. So this is a part of us. How can we become free from this egocentredness if this is a part of ourselves? But another interesting thing is, in Japanese we call this as nodo botoke. Nodo is throat, and botoke is same as Buddha, hotoke. So in Japanese, this is Buddha. It's very different. And when that person is clement, people get at least this bone as a Buddha. Anyway, I don't think it's not a matter of which is right. It has nothing to do with this bone. This is something about our mind. Anyway, this is about the cartoon which Okumura saw, and he wished if only humanity, if we human beings could once and for all vomit up that indigestible green apple of ego attachment. How can we vomit this seventh consciousness? If we can really vomit and become free from that, then we become an enlightened person. But because it's this ego-centeredness is a part of us, not only part of us, it's ourselves. As I talked before that these five skandhas are our body and mind, but these five skandhas are in Buddhism Mara. Mara was conquered by Buddha when Buddha had awakening. but Mara was not killed. That means Mara and Buddha are actually the same thing. So Adam's apple and not仏 the same thing. That means our karma, or this structure, is how Buddha works also. That means there is a transformation. And according to yoga, another part of Yogacara teaching is when we practice, continuously practice, and according to that teaching, it takes more than forever, countless kalpas. But when Bodhisattva attained Buddhahood, those 8 consciousnesses function, transform the function, and became wisdom. First, the Araya consciousness function as a perfect mirror, great perfect mirror wisdom. And ego consciousness function as the wisdom which sees equality of all beings, instead of making this discrimination based on our egocentricity. And 6th consciousness is called wisdom which observe things are there. And first 5 consciousness function as a wisdom which allow us to take action to help others.
Allow us to take action
to help other people or other beings. So nothing is really eliminated, but everything is the same. But the way it functions is different. So 5 skandhas as a Mara can also function as 5 skandhas of Buddha. So our problem or this apple is not something like a cancer. If there's a cancer, then we had surgery and take this out, then we become healthy. But our problem, our egocentricity is not like cancer that is something extra. But we cannot take it out, because without this, we cannot live as an individual person. If we see this is myself, and this is important, so we have to take care of 5 skandhas. So without some kind of self-identity, we cannot live as an individual. But this easily becomes ego-centeredness, function as ego-centeredness. Then how can we transform this is, I think, the point of Buddhist practice. So our practice is not like an operation to take the cancer out, but our practice is how can we live together with this egocentricity without making harmful actions. Anyway, so how can we vomit this apple? In a way, egocentric thought is a little like original sin. Okumura Roshi studied Catholic theology when he was a teacher at a Catholic seminary. So he have fixed a solid knowledge about Catholicism. But he found he couldn't be a Catholic because of the institutionalism. So he quit that job after 6 months. And soon after that he became a Buddhist monk and started to practice Zen. But he continued to read Bible, and he tried to, but according to him, either Buddhist teaching or Zazen practice, and also Christianity. is a kind of a text. He can study the self. To study the self, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. That is what Dogen Zenji said. So for him mean for Uchiyama Roshi, all those teachings are the text to study himself. So he doesn't care whether this is Buddhism or Christianity. So even when he read Bibles, he read as a text of studying the self. So he doesn't care so much about whether what he think or his interpretation is acceptable or not in the context context of Christian theology. And I think when he was around 70 years old, when I visited him with some Buddhist or Soto Zen priest, he said, I'm not a Buddhist and I'm not a Christian at all. I am just who I am. So he was free from that kind of fixed teaching, either Buddhism or Christianity. Both are kind of a tradition or kind of a material he could use to study who he really was. So even though he's talking about the original sin or Adam and Eve, he doesn't care so much about this is really, how can I say, in accordance with Catholic theology. So don't worry about that point. Is it original sin? In Buddhism, true Zazen is, in a sense, the posture of vomiting up that apple. When we sit in this posture, facing the wall, and keep our posture upright, and keep our eyes open, and breathe through our nose deeply, and whatever coming and going in our mind, we just let go. We open our hand. This title of this book means opening the hand of thought. By doing this, according to Uchiyama Roshi, we vomit the apple. That means all those thoughts came from our karma, stored up in alaya consciousness. It's come up, and when we are sitting, there's no object. There's no outside object, only the wall. But still, something come up from our consciousness, become the perception, and become the object of this person sitting. So in this case, our mind is divided into two parts. One is subject, another is object. And we start to interact with this thought. But this is what we call thinking. When we think, even when sitting facing the wall, our mind is separated into two parts. And letting go of thought means take this separation out. That means thoughts are just coming and going, but I don't think. I'm just sitting. So when we start to think, we stop thinking. But when thoughts are just coming and going, that is not thinking. This is a kind of a strange thing. But I always use the analogy of driving a car. When we drive a car and put the gear into neutral, then the engine is still moving. Engine means our brain, and the function of our brain is create thinking. But because the gear is in the neutral, the car doesn't move. That means we don't take any action based on those thoughts coming and going. That is what letting go of thought means. So in our Zazen, letting go of thought our brain, our thinking is idling. It doesn't move our body and mind. And that means we don't create new karma. That is why we can say within this Zazen, we are free from karma. But karma is still working as a thought coming and going. But those thoughts are idling. So this is really a subtle point. We cannot see the difference. But this subtle point is really important. That makes our sitting, our practice of just sitting, very kind of a unique thing. But it doesn't really, change this structure. So our egocentricity is still working. But the point is, we are not deceived by our egocentric thought. We see egocentricity just as egocentricity. He said, so our Zazen is a posture of vomiting up that apple. But when did we eat the apple? It was by no means in some remote mystical past. So this did not happen something in the past, in the history of human beings, and done by someone else, not me. Here we are. Now he repeats what he said about this structure. Here we are merely interdependent existences. We are a collection of all different kind of elements within time and space. A collection of such accidental factors as heredity, the overall current of the times and the social context in which we find ourselves. Without any good reason, moved by ignorance, we purposely stick a label onto this aggregation and called it I. It means within this structure, within this function, five skandhas work together as a kind of a machine. Somehow this idea of I is produced. And even though this I is a production of our five skandhas, the five skandhas think this I is the owner and operator of these five skandhas. So this I become kind of like a God. And we think, or our five skandhas think we belongs to this, and we are the hands and legs of this I. And according to not Okumura Roshi, but according to Buddhism, this is a basic delusion. There's no such I, but only five skandhas. But five skandhas create this I, and we are deceived by this I, and think we belongs to this. That is what he's saying here. We firmly believe that this is ourself, and we cling to ego. We cling to this I, as though it simply existed in the natural order of things. So we think this I is existing permanently, without changing. Even though five skandhas, our body and mind are always changing, but we don't think this I doesn't change. When I was born 66 years ago, I think I was there. I was a baby, and I was a teenager. I was in my 20s, and I became the middle-aged person, and now I am the elder citizen. In all this process, this I doesn't change, even though the condition of body and mind are constantly changing. This I doesn't change, and it looks like permanent. And according to Buddhist teaching, that is basic problem and basic delusion. Natural order of things. Actually, outside of the power of ignorance, which causes attachment to the ego self in each moment, fear is that apple we ate. So this egocentricity or egocentric thought caused by this structure is the apple, according to Okumura Roshi. And by letting go of any kind of thought, we vomit the apple. But we need to vomit not only one time, but almost moment by moment. Because this apple is ourselves. So how can we become free from ourselves? Just see, this I is not me, or this I is not five skandhas. That is how we vomit the apple. And yet we cannot really vomit the apple, because this I and five skandhas are the same thing. Or outside the five skandhas, this I cannot exist. That is a kind of very tricky structure of our life. And that apple is precisely what we are eating again and again, repeatedly, almost moment by moment. So we are creating the original sin moment by moment in our attachment to ourselves. Well, this is what I have to say about these two paragraphs. And in this book, Zazen Teaching of Homeless Kodo, Okumura Roshi talked about the same cartoon. If you have this text, section 47, page 132. This is a collection of Shōhaku Roshi's very short sayings, and Okumura Roshi's comment on Shōhaku Roshi's saying. So I'd like to introduce what the point of Shōhaku Roshi's saying and Okumura Roshi's comment. And I think this is kind of an important point to understand the nature of our practice of Zazen. And the title of this section, 47, is Zazen and Delusion. The title of the section we are reading in this book is Delusion and Zazen. So exactly the same thing. Shōhaku Roshi's saying is as follows. When a husband and wife are in the middle of a quarrel, neither partner thinks they are fighting based on their delusions. When we are fighting, we think I'm right, they are wrong. That's why I have to fight. That's what is happening. But Shōhaku Roshi continues, however, when they practice Zazen, they can understand clearly that they quarreled because of their delusive thoughts. So when we are actually fighting or quarreling, we don't think I'm deluded. If I think I'm deluded, therefore my thinking is not correct or right or good, then there's no reason to fight. But we cannot see that, we are deceived by our thinking, and we think I'm right, and that person is wrong, therefore I have to fight. But Shōhaku Roshi is saying, when we sit quietly, and there's no such object, only the walls, we start to see our view is distorted. So what Shōhaku Roshi is saying is, in our Zazen, we see our delusion, or we see we are deluded. It's a kind of a strange, not strange, but different idea about what Zazen practice really is. We commonly think our Zazen, or not our, but meditation practice in Buddhism is to see the truth, or to discover who we really are. But what Shōhaku Roshi is saying, when we sit, we discover how deluded we are. So we don't see the reality. We see, this is the kind of reality that we are deluded. So we don't see the reality. To me, this is a really important point of our practice. So our practice of Zazen doesn't make us enlightened, great enlightened person. But our practice, in a sense, makes us humble. So no matter how many years we practice Zazen, we cannot say, I have been practicing Zazen and now I understand entire Buddhist teaching. So I make no mistake. I'm a great enlightened person. If some teachers said such a thing, we can see the person is really deluded. according to this teaching. Anyway, in Okumura Roshi's comment on this saying of Shōhaku Roshi, he introduced this cartoon about Adam is trying to vomit the apple. And Okumura Roshi said, if Shōhaku Roshi had seen this cartoon, he would have said, Zazen is a posture in which we vomit the apple we ate before. This is what he said in this book. When Roshi referred to the apple we ate before, he doesn't mean the apple eaten by the first man in the ancient times of the myth. He means that when we quarrel, we eat the apple in the form of our dispute. So through what we are doing based on our egocentric mind, we are eating the apple. That is, we always find the I, this I, within our delusive thoughts, arising moment by moment. When we act with this hardened I means this I become very solid and feel this is more true or real than this ever-changing five skandhas. We cannot rely on five skandhas because things are changing and there are all different kind of things happening. But because this I doesn't change, this is more reliable. That is what hardened means. Hardened I and confront each other we repeatedly eat the apple of original sin. Although we are almost always living based on delusion, we don't think our thoughts are delusive. We live without even considering this possibility. That means when we are doing things, or particularly quarreling or fighting against others, we really always think, I am right, they are wrong. This is realm of Ashura, or fighting spirit. I am right, I have justice, they are wrong, therefore we have to fight against them and eliminate them, then this world becomes a better place. That is what is called Ashura, realm of Ashura, or fighting spirit. But we don't think we are deluded. But Uchamrashi asked why we have such a belief. Because we are completely immersed in delusive thought, we treat them as if they were real. So we don't see this delusive thought as delusion, and we are completely deceived. But when we clearly see this structure, how this I is produced, then we start to see, this is not real thing. Then we see delusion as delusion, and we can be, how can I say, free from this deception. So, Uchamrashi continued, when we do Zazen and settle down, we clearly see how we are dominated by delusion. By letting go of delusion, we see how dominated we are by delusion. So, Uchamrashi quote a few more sayings from the Bible. Zazen is indeed the posture of God. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. This is the saying from New Testament. And in our Zazen, we realize the illusory nature of thoughts. And no matter how powerful they might be, our illusory thought, we don't chase after them, try to get rid of them. We don't try to get rid of them. Or we don't act on them. Just let go. So, Zazen is the posture of, we know that our old self was crucified with him. Crucified with him, him means Jesus. So, for Uchamrashi, this Zazen is a kind of being crucified. We die. That means our karmic delusive I is crucified. Or I have been crucified with Christ. In the end, Zazen is the purest expression of be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Of course, when Uchamrashi uses the word God, it's not God written in the Bible or Christian theology. But in this case, this God is this reality of all beings. Well, it's 11:05. This is what I have to say this morning. Any question or comments? Please.
I'm not sure if it was last Sunday or the Sunday before, but you were talking about how when we desire something or some state of affairs, it looks bigger to us or stands out from everything else. And also when we dislike something and it threatens our egocentricity, it also looks bigger. So do you think, just in relation to interdependence, do you think that our desire and aversion also makes things seem isolated or independent to us instead of interconnected?
Well, that kind of illusory thinking is created within this encountering. So this is a kind of a production of interconnectedness, I think. So everything is a part of this network of interdependent origination. But from my karmic self, this is absolutely right, or only one possible reality. We don't see, this thing looks larger than as it is, because this is mine. And this is important to me to read books. Otherwise we cannot read. That means we can't give a talk today. So this particular eyeglass is larger than the eyeglass in general, or eyeglass sold in the supermarket. But this is also a part of interdependent origination. That means within the relation between this thing and this person, sometimes this looks bigger, and sometimes, when this frame is broken, then I don't care about this anymore. So I see this much smaller than as it is. But that all, I think, process caused by interconnectedness, I think. Well, it is the answer to your question.
Yes, thank you.
Sometimes I forget the meaning of the question. Please.
Question and two questions. One, what is this in Japanese?
Nodo botoke.
Nodo botoke.
Nodo botoke. Nodo is throat, and botoke is same as hotoke. Hotoke means Buddha.
So is it the Buddha's throat?
Or Buddha in the throat.
Buddha in the throat. Okay. All right, so the question about the apple, I find it a fascinating layering of Buddhism and Christianity there. And I'm a little surprised at the notion of vomiting the apple, because what comes to me in my practice is a sense of seeing the apple and not eating it.
So apple is in front of you.
Yeah, it's there, but I'm not eating it. I mean, I eat it plenty, but not always.
Well, anyway, that is how the person who painted the cartoon offered, and Uchimura Roshi agreed.
Yeah.
This practice is vomiting. That means apple is already in within ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's not in front of us, and we have to decide whether we eat this or not. But apple is already here. Or three poisonous mind is already working within us. How can we become free from three poisonous mind? It's not, three poisonous mind is still outside of ourselves, and if we can make choice whether we take it or not. It's already working within ourselves. yesterday I read the part of the Bible of the story about Adam and Eve. That was kind of interesting. It has nothing to do with Buddhism, of course, and it's different from what I talked this morning. But what he said, the God said, God said to Adam, there are many trees in the Garden of Eden, but you can eat any fruits from other trees, but you cannot eat only this tree. And the God called this tree as a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Trees of the knowledge of good and evil. And he said, if you eat this, you shall die. If you eat this fruit of knowledge of good and evil, you will die. I don't know what this die means. Anyway, then, the serpent, the snake, tempted Adam and Eve and ate. After eating, the God said, see, the man has become like one of us. I was surprised this word, one of us. One of us means God was not alone. By eating the apple, man, the creator, become like a God. And this is interesting to me. That means, if so, the thinking of good and evil is not good, is not bad thing, because God has this ability. And what God didn't like God. Human beings become like a God, like himself. To me, that's interesting. So to know good and evil itself is not a matter. But by doing so, human beings become like a God. Of course, this is something not good for God. Or because of this knowledge, we human beings think we are like the God. We can control everything. We can make judge everything. And we feel like we are like the God. Of course, that is a problem. And to see why that is a problem, I think is more kind of understandable when we have some idea from Buddhism. That means our human knowledge of good and evil is influenced by egocentricity. But in the case of God, it is said, God give sun and rain, either both good and evil people. So God is beyond good and bad, even though no good and bad. It has no egocentricity. But for us human beings, when we think of good and bad, this good is good for me, or bad for me. And when I read this story in the Bible, that part is not clear. Why knowing good and bad is a problem. So to see both sides, I think, makes the point clear why this is a problem, why this ability to think or to think, how can I say, discriminating way. Because our discrimination is based on our egocentricity. And another thing, God continues, and now he might reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life. So there is another tree beside the tree of knowledge of evil and good and evil. There is another tree named tree of life. So God was afraid that human beings reach that tree of life. and take also, he might reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. I don't know what this means, but it's interesting, there are tree of knowledge of good and bad, or good and evil, and a tree of life. And God didn't like human beings eat the tree of life and live forever.
And didn't mention the tree of life earlier.
No, it does.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it's from the Bible,
Oh.
Old Testament. This is a translation, this is exact quote from the Bible, but not often mentioned. But this, tree of life.
Did God say to Adam and Eve, do not eat from the tree of life?
Mm-hmm.
He did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. So there's two trees
Two trees.
that Adam and
yes.
Eve cannot eat from.
Right.
Uh-huh.
To me, that's interesting. And it seems now, in the 21st century, we start to control our life through, like bioscience and biotechnology.
Yeah.
So it seems we have eaten the fruits of life. That might be another problem. Not only good and bad. Please.
I have a little different take on Genesis, and I'm really happy you mentioned the second tree, because it seems to me that the tree of knowledge, or the distinction between good and evil, corresponds to the first 5 levels of our sense perception of the skins. And then it seems to me that levels probably 6, 7, and 8 are the equivalent of the second tree, which is, and this is where you're going to disagree with me and where my thoughts are going. I have to keep struggling with this. The idea of eternal life is an idea of permanence, of non-changing. And that second tree seems to me to correspond very closely with level 8. Because if you've got eternal, I can't quite remember the IOG translation that you gave, the eternal unchanging wisdom, it seems to me that that's permanent.
To me, this is really interesting. There are, in that story, there are 2 trees. The tree of thinking, good and bad, and tree of life. And
it actually say in the Genesis thing,
yes.
The fear is they will become gods, plural, like us. And so it's the eternal aspect. The initial sin of eating the apple was becoming aware of the first 5 levels of awareness. Then the casting out of the garden, in terms of Genesis, was to prevent a knowledge of permanence so that they would have eternal life.
But one thing I don't understand is God didn't like human beings eat the fruits of life and live forever. So he made a kind of a, how can I say, some kind of protection of the tree from human beings eating. So human beings couldn't reach the tree of life. So I don't know much about Christianity or Bible, so but it's kind of very interesting point. If I think about the tree of good and bad and tree of life, we let go of this good and bad and return to this life. That is how we live forever. But somehow God didn't like human beings eat the fruit of life. This is a really interesting thing to me. Anyway, thank you very much. Oh, please.
Does Zen agree with the statement that the Yogacara, the mind only, the world is mine only, or whatever you say.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Maybe take that up another time.
If I started explain 5 yes and 5 no, then it takes more than 1 hour. So, thank you.